All right, today we're going to build a system, a complete system for mastering pretty much any subject you can think of. We're going to talk about how to get past that feeling of being stuck and really unlock deep, lasting knowledge. Have you ever had that feeling you're just paralyzed? You're staring at this mountain of information, right? A huge textbook, maybe a new skill you want to learn, or just a massive project, and you have absolutely no idea where to even start. It's that feeling of being completely and totally overwhelmed. We've all been there. Well, here's the good news. That feeling of paralysis, it isn't you. It's not some personal failing. It's a system failure. And that's what we're here to fix. Today, we're going to build a better system, one that's actually grounded in cognitive science, that you can apply to, well, absolutely anything. So here's our game plan. It's a 4-part journey. First, we'll go from chaos to clarity. Then, we'll get into the art of focus. After that, we'll dive into some really powerful active learning strategies. And finally, we'll bridge the gap from just learning something to actually achieving mastery. Okay, let's dive into our first section. It's all about deconstruction. The first step to tackling any huge challenge is to stop seeing it as this one giant, terrifying thing and instead start breaking it into pieces you can actually handle. So how do we do that? Well, here's this really brilliant, super practical 4-step method from Bowdoin College. First, you define your major milestones, the big sub-goals. Then, for each one of those, you brainstorm every single little task you need to do. Next, you put all those tasks in a logical order. And here's the most important part. You actually schedule these tiny tasks on your calendar. All of a sudden, that terrifying goal of write a research paper turns into write 300 words today. See? Totally manageable. So why does this whole breaking things down thing actually work so well? Well, it's not magic, it's cognitive psychology. There's this concept called chunking. The thing is, our working memory, the part of our brain that's juggling information right now, is actually pretty limited. Chunking is how we get around that. It's the process of binding little bits of information together into a bigger, meaningful whole. This makes it way easier for our brains to process and remember everything. The psychologist who pioneered this research, George A. Miller, he called it recoding. And he said it's an extremely powerful weapon for dealing with information. And you do this all the time without even thinking about it. Just think about a phone number. You don't remember 10 separate digits, do you? No way. You remember it as 3 or 4 chunks. That's what we're talking about. We're essentially hacking the limits of our own memory. Okay, so we've taken that giant mountain and we've broken it down into a pile of small, manageable rocks. Awesome. But now comes the next challenge. How do you actually pick up those rocks one by one without getting distracted or completely burning out? Well, that's what this next section is all about. The art of focus. We often think that productivity is all about willpower, right? Just forcing yourself to sit down for these marathon work sessions. But that's just not how our brains work best. It's not about willpower, it's about structure. It turns out that short, intense, really focused bursts of work, followed by actual rest, are way more effective than slogging through hours of kinda sort of working, but also checking your phone. And probably the best system for creating that structure is the famous Pomodoro technique. It is so simple, it's beautiful. Here's how it works. You pick one single task, just one. You set a timer for 25 minutes, and for those 25 minutes, you work on that task and nothing else. 0 interruptions. When the timer goes off, you stop and you take a short break, like 5 or 10 minutes. You repeat that 4 times, and then, this is key, you take a longer break, maybe 20 or 30 minutes, to really recharge. Now, here's a really important rule for this to work. That 25-minute block, that Pomodoro, is indivisible. That means if you get interrupted, the whole thing is void. It doesn't count. You have to start over. And that sounds harsh, but this simple little rule is what trains your brain to fiercely protect that focused time. It teaches you to put your phone on silent, close your tabs, and really manage distractions before they happen. All right, so we've got our small tasks, and we have a method for focusing on them. We're on a roll. But how do we make sure we're actually understanding the material? Not just passively staring at a page or watching a video. That's what this next section is about. We're shifting from just consuming information to actively engaging with it. And for this, I want to introduce you to one of my favorite mental tools, the Feynman technique, named after the legendary physicist Richard Feynman. It's basically a powerful self-test. Here's the deal. You take a concept you're trying to learn, and you pretend you have to explain it to a 12-year-old. Use really simple language, no jargon. Now, pay attention to where you get stuck, where you stumble, or where you're forced to use a complicated word. Boom, That's it. You've just found the exact gaps in your own understanding. So you go back to the book, fill in that gap, and then you try to explain it again, simply. It really boils down to what the philosopher Mortimer Adler said. He put it perfectly. The person who says he knows what he thinks but cannot express it usually does not know what he thinks. It's so true, right? If you can't explain it simply, you probably don't get it deeply enough yourself. Real knowledge is being able to translate the complex into the simple. Okay, another really powerful tool for active learning is something called concept mapping. If the Feynman technique is all about verbal simplicity, concept mapping is about visual clarity. Think of it like drawing a map of your knowledge. Instead of having a bunch of scattered facts floating around in your head, you visually organize them into a structure, a roadmap that shows how all these different ideas connect to each other and to the main topic. And a good concept map isn't just a bunch of bubbles with lines between them. The real magic, the most crucial part, is the little words you write on the lines, the linking words. This is what forces you to get specific about the relationship between ideas. Is one thing a cause of another? Is it an example of? Does it lead to something else? That process, that act of defining the connections, that is where the deep learning really kicks in. And that brings us to our final section. We know how to break things down, how to focus, and how to actively engage with the material. But how do we make it all stick? How do we make that knowledge permanent so it's not just something we crammed for a test and forgot a week later? How do we go from just learning to true mastery? Okay, one of the biggest leaps you can make towards mastery is switching from what's called blocked practice to interleaved practice. Now, most of us learn with blocked practice. That's when you drill one thing over and over again. Think like 20 multiplication problems in a row. Interleaved practice is different. It's when you mix up different types of problems all in one session. Now, I'll be honest, it feels harder and more confusing while you're doing it, but the research is clear. It is way more effective for long-term retention because it forces your brain to learn which strategy to use, not just how to execute one strategy on repeat. And this isn't just some abstract theory. Check out this incredible data from a study with college baseball players. They had one group use blocked practice, 15 fastballs in a row, then 15 curveballs. They improved by 25%. Pretty good. But the other group used interleaf practice. They faced a totally random mix of pitches, just like in a real game. Their improvement? A massive 57%. It's because they weren't just learning how to hit a fastball, they were learning how to identify the pitch and then react, which is the real skill. So what's the underlying principle here? Well, a lot of it comes down to something called cognitive load theory. The best way to think about it is that your brain has a limited budget of mental energy or working memory at any given moment. Effective learning happens when the material is designed to minimize the energy you waste just trying to decipher how it's presented. That way, you can spend your entire mental budget on the thing that actually matters, learning the content itself. And here is a perfect visual example of what I'm talking about. Look at the image on the left. The diagram and the labels are totally separate. Your brain has to waste a ton of energy just jumping back and forth, trying to match A to A and B to B. That's high cognitive load. It's inefficient. Now look at the right. The labels are integrated right into the diagram. It's instantly clear. The cognitive load is way lower, which frees up all that mental energy so you can actually focus on understanding the circuit. Finally, let's put it all together with the ultimate roadmap for mastery. This is called Bloom's taxonomy. Think of it like a ladder. You can't just jump to the top. You have to climb it rung by rung. At the very bottom, you have remembering, just basic facts. Then you climb to understanding, being able to explain it, then applying it, then analyzing it, breaking it down, then evaluating it, making judgments. And at the very, very top of the ladder, creating, making something brand new with everything you've learned. And really, that's the whole point of this system we've been talking about. True mastery isn't about just knowing a bunch of facts. It's not about cramming for a test. It's about being able to use those facts to analyze, to evaluate, and ultimately to create something new. It's about climbing that ladder. So now you have the system. You have the tools. From deconstructing the challenge and focusing your attention to using active learning strategies and pushing for real mastery, the only question left is, what are you going to tackle first? What complex topic that once seemed totally paralyzing are you ready to master?